Have you ever walked into a place and felt instantly that something was wrong? That gut feeling, the one that tightens your chest, makes your pulse spike, and whispers in your ear, "This isn't right." That's exactly what Alexander Halle, one of the wealthiest men in the country, felt the moment a small voice interrupted the quiet grandeur of his marble mansion. "Why is my mother's photo in your house?" The question was simple, short, and yet it struck through the air like a blade. Halle froze, every step he had taken that morning suddenly meaningless. In front of him stood a girl, no older than 10, clutching a small tray of homemade sweets. Her eyes piercing, cold, and calculating far beyond her years. Alexander Halle was used to being in control. Billionaire tycoon, master of high-stakes deals, he had seen manipulation, lies, and ambition in all its forms. But this child unsettled him. She wasn't here for toys, for mischief, or to make idle conversation. She was here with a purpose. The girl's name was Ava Thompson. Her mother, Grace, was dying. Cancer had consumed her, slowly, cruelly, and their family had no money to fight it. Ava had been selling sweets on the streets since she was 8, fighting for every breath of hope she could buy for her mother. But now, standing in the golden entrance hall of one of the most expensive mansions in the country, her small frame radiated confidence. She was no longer just a child selling candy. She was a detective, a strategist, a young girl on a mission to uncover the truth. Alexander's eyes drifted involuntarily to the photograph she had pointed at. A young black woman in a white dress, radiant, smiling next to him, more, someone who looked exactly like him, Grace Thompson. The woman Ava had called her mother. The woman Halle had mourned for over a decade. But according to every story he had been told, she had died years ago. "Your mother? She told me she died 10 years ago," Halle stammered, his voice trembling. "There was an accident. A funeral." Ava tilted her head slightly, observing his reaction like a seasoned investigator. "Funny," she said softly, her tone calm but biting. "She's alive. Well, technically, cancer is taking care of that. But I guess someone as wealthy as you already knew, didn't you?" Every word was deliberate. Every pause designed to make him squirm. Alexander felt the floor beneath him shift. He had lived a decade believing a story carefully constructed to keep him away from the truth. And now, staring into the eyes of this child, he realized that story was a lie. "How old are you?" he asked, almost whispering. Double quotes, 10. "I'll be 11 next month," Ava replied, smiling but not like a child. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed a suspicion, who knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Hale's mind raced. If Grace was alive, and if this girl was truly his daughter, it meant deception, betrayal, and crimes he had never imagined. Someone had stolen years of his life, and now they were about to pay. Ava's next words cut even deeper. "You said? My mother died in an accident. There must be documents, police reports, death certificates. They don't just disappear, do they?" Hale's palms grew sweaty. He realized for the first time in over a decade that he had never seen any official documentation of Grace's death. Everything had been handled by his mother, Victoria Halle, who claimed she was protecting him. Protecting him from what? From the truth. Ava's voice broke the silence again, measured, controlled. "My mother talks in her sleep sometimes, Mr. Halle, when she's delirious. She says your name, William? Forgive me," she whispers. For weeks, I listened. I started asking questions. And I found things. Halle tried to swallow, tried to form words, but found none. This child, barely 10, had pieced together more of the truth than he ever could have imagined. Her questions were not innocent. They were precision instruments, cutting through the lies of decades. "And why did you come here alone?" he finally, mangied voice barely audible. "Because I had to," Ava said simply. "Time is a luxury we don't have. My mother is dying. I have been watching, listening, calculating, and now it's time to see what you know." Her words were terrifying. In their clarity, Hallie realized that Ava had arrived with a plan, a strategy, a purpose. She wasn't just seeking answers, she was preparing for justice. The mansion's marble floors reflected her determined eyes. Every expensive object she touched, every photograph she studied, was a calculation, not admiration. Not wonder, precision. Observation, evidence collection. And as Alexander Holly watched, frozen in disbelief, a chilling thought pierced him. This is only the beginning, because in the coming days, what this girl would uncover would unravel not only the carefully constructed lies of his family, but also a hidden web of secrets that no billionaire wanted exposed. And in her tiny hands rested the power to rewrite history. The question hung in the grand hallway, echoing into every corner. "Why is my mother's photo in your mansion?" was a question that would set off a chain of events no one could stop. A chain that would reveal betrayal, murder, greed, and the unimaginable courage of a 10-year-old girl determined to see justice done. And the world would never forget her name. Ava Thompson. The morning after that explosive confrontation, Ava Thompson woke with the precision of a general preparing for battle. 10 years old. Small in stature, but inside her burned a fire that no child should ever have to wield. Her mother, Grace, was still fragile, still fighting for life, and every second counted. Meanwhile, Alexander Hale reeling from the revelation that his beloved Grace had been alive all these years, and that Ava was his daughter, sat in his private office, stunned, overwhelmed, and unprepared for the storm his 10-year-old daughter was about to unleash. Ava approached him calmly, a broken phone in her hand, the cracked screen reflecting her sharp gaze. "I've been watching, listening, researching. For 3 months," she said. "I know about your mother, the lies your family built, and the people who orchestrated everything." Alexander swallowed hard, fear and awe mingling in his chest. "How? How could a child do this?" he whispered, as if saying it aloud might break the spell of disbelief. "Because they underestimated me," Ava said, her voice firm, steady, unyielding. "Powerful people think children are weak. But I've learned how they operate. I've learned their patterns. And now, I'm going to use that knowledge to expose them." She began showing him the first pieces of her investigation. Names, dates, and events, meticulously organized in a sequence that revealed an ugly pattern of manipulation and corruption. "Montgomery and Associates," she said, pointing to the name of a high-profile law firm. "Your mother's firm. They handled all the sensitive matters. They lied. They covered up crimes. They separated families. My mother's family." Alexander's heart raced. He realized immediately the 10-year-old standing before him had connected threads he hadn't even seen. A child, working from scraps of information, had outmaneuvered the most experienced legal minds. "They'll be meeting tomorrow night," Ava continued, flipping through the stack of notes she had compiled. "All the partners. Certain clients. They don't know we know. They think the past is buried, but it isn't." Alexander felt a cold chill creep down his spine. These were people who had controlled power, manipulated truth, and silenced anyone who threatened their world. And now, his child was about to turn the tables. "I have a plan," Ava said, as if reading his thoughts. "We gather evidence. I've already spoken to someone who can help." Samantha Torres, investigative journalist. Known for exposing corporate and political corruption. She trusts me. And she's going to bring them down. Alexander blinked. Stunned, a 10-year-old, and she has the journalist's trust. "She has the truth," Ava said simply. "And truth is stronger than fear." The next hours were a whirlwind. Ava moving with the grace and confidence of someone who had always belonged in power, organized a strategy. Alexander sat beside her, both proud and terrified, as she laid out the steps to uncover the conspiracy that had stolen so much from their family. "First, we verify everything," Ava explained, pointing to spreadsheets, documents, and photos. "Second, we make sure the authorities are aware. Third, we prepare the confrontation. And fourth, we make it public." Alexander's mind raced. He had been a man of control, wealth, and influence, yet here he was, taking orders from a 10-year-old, and yet, he understood. She was right. Every move calculated, every word precise, every gesture intentional. Ava's plan was audacious. She wasn't just seeking justice for her mother or herself, she was aiming for a reckoning. The people who had destroyed lives, lied to everyone, and orchestrated pain for decades would finally be exposed. "And if they resist?" Alexander asked, finally finding his voice. "Then we let the evidence speak," Ava said, a small, determined smile crossing her face. "Because evidence doesn't lie. And the law, eventually, it catches up." That evening, as Alexander watched Ava map routes, mark Thames, and review documents in his grand mansion, he realized a truth he hadn't understood before. Courage has no age, determination has no size, and justice can come from the smallest, most unexpected places. And as the sun set over the city, a quiet tension filled the mansion. For the first time in decades, the balance of power had shifted. It was no longer the elite controlling the narrative. It was a child with intelligence, courage, and a plan, ready to reclaim what had been stolen. The real question now was simple. Would the conspirators survive the storm she was about to unleash? One thing was certain by the time the night ended. Nothing would ever be the same again. The night of the meeting had arrived, and the city streets seemed unusually quiet, almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside a sleek, unmarked conference room, the partners of Montgomery and Associates were gathering, oblivious to the storm about to hit them. They thought they were untouchable experts in manipulation, masters of influence, men and women who had shaped lives without consequence for decades. But they hadn't counted on one 10-year-old girl with a plan. Ava Thompson sat at the head of a long, polished table, her opened laptop displaying a live feed of the building's entrance, and stacks of neatly organized documents stacked before her like soldiers ready for battle. Her calm demeanor made the room seem unnaturally tense, as if her very presence bent reality. "Good evening, gentlemen," she began, her voice steady, unnervingly mature. "I hope you don't mind the change of venue. I thought it would be more appropriate to meet here." Dr. Richard Montgomery, the senior partner, stopped mid-step in the doorway, his face drained of color. How did you get in here? Where are the security guards?" "They're busy explaining to the police why they were rushing classified documents out of the building," Ava replied casually, her eyes scanning the room. She flicked a finger toward her laptop, revealing a real-time video feed of the building's entrance. The partner's nerves began to fray. Alexander Holley entered behind her, flanked by Samantha Torres, the investigative journalist, and two federal agents. His chest swelled with a mix of paternal pride and disbelief. The realization that his daughter had orchestrated this operation alone left him awestruck. "You are officially under federal investigation for conspiracy, blackmail, document forgery, and murder," Samantha announced, her tone cutting like a blade. The partners froze, their carefully constructed facades beginning to crumble. "This is ridiculous," Dr. Montgomery blurted, trying to assert control. "Can I prove it?" Ava countered, her small hand pressing keys on the laptop. Instantly, the room filled with the sound of recorded conversations, discussions, and plans laid bare. The partners' voices echoed in the room, exposing their darkest deeds. Montgomery's jaw tightened. "Those recordings are illegal. Can't be used." "Actually, they can," Ava replied, producing a folder with an official court order. Article 18 of the Federal Code. Section 2511. Recordings made on private property, when there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, are admissible in courtes, especially with authorization from a court order. Samantha helped me secure it based on preliminary evidence I provided. Alexander's mind was reeling. His daughter, 10 years old, had not only gathered the evidence, but had taken the first steps toward legal authorization. Every adult in the room, despite their experience and cunning, had been outmaneuvered by a child with clarity of purpose and unwavering focus. Ava continued, switching files to display bank transfers, document forgeries, and proof of bribes paid to judges and politicians. "Your influence didn't just ruin my family," she said, her voice unwavering. "It destroyed at least 15 other families over the past 20 years. And now, they're all part of a class action lawsuit with estimated damages totaling $2.3 billion. The room fell silent, the partners' arrogance replaced with panic. Each one realized, too late, that the web of lies, manipulation, and corruption they had spun for decades was unraveling before their eyes. And the person pulling the threads was a 10-year-old girl. "You broke up a family, condemned an innocent woman to poverty, and caused my mother's death," Alexander said, voice trembling with rage. "And you call that business?" Ava's eyes were cold but controlled. "Business only has meaning when it doesn't destroy lives. You destroyed lives. And now, the truth will be exposed." Montgomery tried one final argument, claiming that Ava's testimony was invalid because of her age. Samantha interjected sharply. "She may be 10, but she's also Alexander, Hale's daughter. As the direct victim of this conspiracy, he has every legal right to pursue justice. And we have 15 other families joining this action. The damages are real, and so is the accountability." The room felt suffocating. Every chair, every document, every whisper of a lie had been turned into evidence against them. Ava's meticulous preparation, her intelligence, and her determination had rendered their experience meaningless. And then she revealed the final blow. The entire meeting was being broadcast live on Carter Enterprises' social media channels. Already, thousands of viewers were witnessing the unmasking of a multi-decade conspiracy in real time. Panic erupted. "You've destroyed our lives," Dr. Montgomery gasped, his voice faltering as agents led them out in handcuffs. "No," Ava said softly. "You destroyed your own lives the moment you decided power and money were worth more than family and humanity. We just documented it." Alexander stepped forward, placing a hand on Ava's shoulder. How did you do this?" He whispered, awe and disbelief mingling in his voice. Ava smiled a rare, genuine smile, free of calculation. "I spent 10 years watching powerful people destroy lives through lies. I just applied the same tactics, but this time, in the name of justice." As the news of their downfall spread, Alexander and Ava turned their attention to the bigger picture. The man who had watched them from across the street, recording every move for 3 years, had been arrested. The Pandora's box of corruption was opening wider than anyone had imagined. 6 months later, the mansion was alive with laughter, sunlight streaming through every window. Grace, fully recovered, read quietly in her favorite armchair, color returned to her cheeks and warmth to her eyes. Alexander watched his daughter, organizing letters, messages of support, and invitations for her to speak about justice and integrity. The story had inspired an entire generation. Children saw that courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome injustice, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. Harvard offered Ava a scholarship, while Carter Enterprises thrived. Its reputation for integrity, attracting investors from around the world. The corrupt lawyers faced prison sentences, their assets seized, and the officials who aided them were finally held accountable. The small 10-year-old girl had dismantled a system built over decades, and as Ava, Grace, and Alexander sat together, reflecting on the journey, one lesson rang clear. Revenge isn't about destruction, it's about building something so true, so just that the world cannot ignore it. Ava looked at her parents and smiled. "Injustice is like cancer," she said, voice calm but firm. "If you don't treat it completely, it comes back stronger." For the first time in a long while, they could breathe. Their family was whole, their enemies defeated, and the world had seen that intelligence, courage, and justice could prevail even from the smallest and most unexpected of places. The question remained, of course, what's next for a girl who had already changed the world before she had even turned 11? But for tonight, the battle was won. And the victory, they knew, would echo far beyond the walls of the mansion, proof that no lie, no power, no conspiracy could withstand the truth when met with courage and strategy. The chaos of the previous night still lingered like a storm cloud. But inside the Carter mansion, a new day had begun, quiet, calm, and impossibly bright. For the first time in years, Alexander Hall felt an unfamiliar sensation: hope. Grace, his beloved, was alive and recovering. The woman who had been forced into the shadows by deceit and greed was now finally free from illness. Surrounded by the love she deserved, Ava, at just 11 years old, moved through the mansion with the confidence of a seasoned strategist. She was organizing letters, invitations, and messages of support from across the country, each one a testament to the lives her actions had touched. Social media feeds had exploded overnight. People were calling her a hero, an inspiration, and a symbol of courage in the face of corruption. Alexander watched his daughter with pride that nearly overwhelmed him. Her calm intelligence, her unwavering determination, and her moral clarity had not only saved their family, but also exposed one of the most extensive networks of manipulation and greed in decades. She had turned their suffering into action, and action into justice. "Look at this," Grace said, holding up an envelope with the Harvard seal. "They're offering her a full scholarship." Ava smiled, but remained grounded. "Education is important, yes," she said. "But right now, we have more work to do. We need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Alexander nodded. Her words carried the weight of experience far beyond her years. He realized that the same courage and clarity that had guided her through the halls of power and deceit had become the family's new compass. The downfall of Montgomery and Associates had sent shockwaves across the business world. The once untouchable law firm was dismantled. Their assets were frozen. Corrupt judges faced trials, and politicians involved in their schemes were being investigated. The ripple effects were enormous. People who had been complicit in decades of manipulation and greed were finally being held accountable, yet for the Harley family, the victory was deeply personal. Grace's health had been restored with the best medical treatment money could buy. And Ava had ensured that no one could ever rob their family of love and security again. Alexander watched his daughter as she carefully compiled her notes and spreadsheets, preparing them to share with other families who had suffered under the same system. "What are you planning next?" he asked, half in jest, half in awe. Ava looked up, her eyes bright but thoughtful. "For now, being a family," she said. "Maybe learning to play video games instead of planning federal investigations." They laughed together, a sound that filled the mansion and seemed to push out the shadows of the past. The warmth of the sun streamed through the large windows, touching the furniture, the walls, and every corner of the home that had once been a silent witness to grief and loss. As the day progressed, news of their victory spread worldwide. Social media channels had millions of views, and Ava's actions had inspired countless children and adults alike. People saw that intelligence, courage, and moral clarity could stand against greed, corruption, and decades of deception. The story of a 10-year-old girl had become a symbol of justice prevailing over power in the legal world. Alexander worked closely with federal authorities and Samantha Torres to ensure that all evidence was properly documented. Every corrupt official, every accomplice, and every fraudulent transaction was being scrutinized. The impact of Ava's investigation went far beyond their family. It became a case study in accountability, ethics, and courage. And yet, despite the global attention and the overwhelming support, the Haley family remained grounded. Grace returned to Reading in her favorite armchair, the color restored to her cheeks, and peace in her heart. Alexander reconnected with friends and colleagues, but he knew his greatest achievement was here. In the confidence, courage, and intelligence of his daughter, Ava, now 11, had evolved from a child burdened by hardship into a young strategist capable of navigating the darkest corners of human deception. Her ability to see the truth, her capacity to act with precision, and her courage to face powerful adversaries had changed her life and the lives of everyone around her forever. "Do you realize," Grace said, looking at her daughter, "that you could have simply reunited us quietly, and it would have been enough?" Ava shook her head. "It wouldn't have been enough. Injustice is like cancer. If you don't treat it completely, it comes back stronger. What happened to other families? They deserve justice too." Alexander reached for her hand, his heart swelling. "You've done more than I ever imagined. You've not only saved your mother but also changed the world for so many others." The victory was complete, yet the story left its mark on everyone involved. The man who had been watching from across the street during the initial confrontation had been apprehended. Other members of the criminal network, who had believed themselves untouchable, were under investigation. The effects of Ava's actions were unfolding like ripples across the ocean, touching lives far beyond their home. As evening fell, the family sat together in the mansion's garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson. They were finally free from lies, from fear, and from the shadow of injustice. Alexander, Grace, and Ava could finally embrace a life of peace, knowing that courage and intelligence had prevailed over greed and corruption. The story of Ava Thompson became more than a tale of family reunification. It became a symbol of hope. Children learned that age does not define capability, and adults were reminded that integrity, determination, and intelligence could overcome the most entrenched systems of power. And while the mansion now resonated with laughter, love, and life, the lesson remained clear. The best revenge is not destruction, but building something true, enduring, and beautiful. Ava's brilliance, her courage, and her unwavering sense of justice had done exactly that. For the Holle family, the battles of the past were over, but the legacy of justice and courage was only beginning. And Ava, the girl who had turned pain into power, could finally enjoy being a child, knowing that she had made the world a better place. The sun set fully, leaving the mansion bathed in soft, golden light. For the first time in years, there was only peace, love, and the knowledge that truth, when met with intelligence and courage, will always find a way to prevail.